In the southwest corner of Wyoming, a city of 12,000 takes pride in a remarkable tradition of historic preservation. Evanston, Wyoming has worked to renovate many of its significant landmarks, restoring them to serve the community in new ways. Along the rails, among many historic gems, sits Evanston's Roundhouse and Railyards, a rare and precious national treasure. This 27-acre site is a tangible symbol of our nation's railroad past. Only a handful of roundhouses are still standing today. A roundhouse is a unique type of American building, a semicircular stable designed especially for the care and feeding of the iron horse. An early steam locomotive could travel only about 100 miles on a supply of coal and water. These hungry beasts had to be fed, watered, and serviced at intervals along the rail line. A roundhouse provided a sheltered place to perform these tasks on many engines at the same time. The turntable routes engines and rolling stock into individual roundhouse stalls. Evanston's turntable continues to operate, bringing old-time excitement to those who step on for a spin. A 5-year renovation of the machine shop, completed in February of 2004, transformed a once-neglected building into a model of historic preservation. More about these two magnificent buildings, the machine shop and the adjacent roundhouse, as we continue. First, a brief history of Evanston, Wyoming, along with some background on the roundhouse and railyards that grace the city. Pursuit of coast-to-coast rail travel brought Evanston into being. Construction of the Union Pacific Rail Line began in 1865 in Omaha, Nebraska, and headed steadily westward until it joined with the Central Pacific in May of 1869 at Promontory, Utah, completing the Transcontinental Railroad. Evanston was born as a railside base camp in 1868 and eventually grew into a city.
One reason you can tell Evanston is a railroad town is that Front Street faces the tracks. So the town was oriented from the very beginning to the railroad. And there are people in town who are 4th and 5th generation family members, having worked for the railroad in one capacity or another. The roundhouse and rail-yards are an extremely important part of local history and of family history.
Being on the main line of the tracks, you can hear trains going through Evanston on a pretty much constant basis. Most people don't understand the impact that the railroad still has, especially on southern Wyoming. There's still thousands of employees that work for the railroad.
And you can almost smell and feel what had happened at that place for many, many years. You can almost hear the sounds of the machines, the work that was going on down at the Roundhouse and Railyards, especially at noon when the whistle would blow, and at 4 o'clock at the close of their shift for the day.
From 1912 to 1926, Evanston's Roundhouse and Railyards were in full operation, employing over 100 men to service the maintenance-intensive steam engines of the day. But as steam power advanced, locomotives no longer needed to stop in Evanston. And in 1926, the Union Pacific moved to close the Roundhouse and Railyards. After a city delegation traveled to Omaha to plead its case, the Union Pacific decided to reopen Evanston's facilities as a reclamation, manufacturing, and repair plant, which would provide equipment and machinery for the entire UP system. Elmer Danks started working at the site when it reopened in 1927. He made a career of it, spending over 45 years in several different jobs.
Everything that was broken or worn out was shipped into the Evanston reclamation plant. It got to be called the railroad junkyard. And when they received a requisition for any of this material, why, we would get that and take it into the part of the shop that repaired that particular item. And then when it was repaired and put in new condition, it was taken back out and loaded up into boxcars and shipped to the various places on the railroad that required that material. We had some of the best mechanics on the railroad working down there. They were clever. They'd figure out a better way to do it, and it was accepted by the railroad and appreciated.
Employment at the rail yards fluctuated over the decades, but dwindled as steam engines were retired in favor of diesel-electric technology. 125 men lost their jobs when operations were shut down for good on December 31st, 1971. After closing, the Union Pacific Railroad deeded the Roundhouse and Railyards to the city of Evanston. The city leased the property to railroad repair companies until the last tenant moved out in 1998. Then community leaders stepped in to save the site, taking on the city's most ambitious historic preservation project to date. Now get ready for a guided tour as we take a closer look at two of the buildings on the rail yards. First the Roundhouse, and then the machine shop. Join Wyoming historian Dave Cathka and preservationist Alan Comp as they begin at the turntable.
As you know, railroads don't turn corners very easily, and using a turntable made it much more possible to sort of get this kind of intensity of work that had to go on in this place.
Yeah, they're pretty good sized machines as well, and
very large and very heavy. It's a roundhouse on purpose. You know, instead of building a long building with lots of separate track trying to go in, they built a semicircular building with separate stalls, and this turntable literally turns. So you pull a locomotive or a piece of rolling stock onto the turntable, line it up to the stall you want to get into, and then roll it into that stall where it's indoors and all the equipment and power you need is there to work on that piece of equipment.
oh boy, Alan, these are big doors.
Big equipment. So as you can see, each of these slots or each of these bays in this roundhouse takes one large piece of equipment. The track comes off the round table into that bay, and there's where the men can work on it. And I think it's important to remember that this was a major repair facility on the main line throughout its history. You had to work indoors, it gets cold, but you also had to work on equipment because it's big and heavy. You can't just send it back to Chicago.
Right, and we're kind of isolated out here, but this was pretty complicated equipment for the time, and they had to have a place where they could maintain it and repair it on a regular basis.
And what's exciting about using a place like this in the future is that you kind of bring that railroad history into the future. I mean, it sort of helped define this place as a state and as a place, but it also helps remind us of kind of where we came from. What's also exciting about this building to me is if you look around at the way this building is built, the kind of high space that exists in the building, the openness of the building, this sawtooth roof as it's called, floods the whole interior of the building with light. It's something you can really connect to. And I think that's important for us all as we move into the 21st century to be able to hook into that 19th century past and remember the way in which men and women really worked to make things happen. And this place was a hard-working place.
Boxcar Road, named you for a train, but a truck was carrying you low down Boxcar Road.
People aren't sure what to expect when they hear of a rail yard machine shop, and then they get there and it's this beautiful light space that has been wonderfully rehabbed.
It has a calmness about it. As fast as it is, you can go down and walk around inside the building and feel real peace. As the hours of the day pass through, the sunlight comes in and changes the shadows. It's a beautiful place to be in.
It's light, it's fresh, it's a wonderful space. And then you look across the way and you see the Roundhouse that right now has broken windows, it's dirty inside. The Roundhouse looks now the way the machine shop did then.
Once they enter the machine shop, they can see the potential of what the Roundhouse has to offer.
The machine shop was renovated over a 5-year period at a cost of $2.5 million. Partnerships made it possible. Organizations like the Wyoming Department of Transportation, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Wyoming Business Council stepped up as generous partners. Locally, Roundhouse Restoration Incorporated and the children of Aspen Elementary pitched in with support for special events and fundraisers. The Urban Renewal Ball is Evanston's premier fundraiser, which is organized entirely by volunteers. This community event, held annually for over 20 years, raises substantial funds for the Railyards project. Private donations from foundations and individuals are another indispensable source of support. Local, state, and congressional leadership continue to work as a catalyst, moving the Railyards project forward. Since restoration, Evanston's machine shop has become a center of community life and is used weekly for a variety of events. The adjacent Roundhouse holds the promise to expand that community spirit into a new space of at least 65,000 square feet. Through a public planning process, office space was identified as an appropriate use for the restored Roundhouse. Currently, Evanston's city administration offices are housed in 3 separate buildings. By consolidating municipal offices in the Roundhouse, it's possible to centralize city functions and to provide room for future growth. Efficiencies in maintenance and operations are expected, along with the public benefit of a one-stop city hall. A public use of the Roundhouse meshes well with plans to offer interpretive tours of the site to visitors. The Roundhouse, that has been one of Evanston's defining landmarks for nearly a century, will once again play a vital role in the community. Work on the Roundhouse has already begun, stabilizing the building in preparation for major renovations to come. After completion of the Roundhouse, attention will be turned to the Powerhouse. This building presents an opportunity to add commercial space to the Railyards, possibly a restaurant. It will take the continued efforts of community, state, and national leaders, citizens and volunteers, along with foundations and other organizations, to realize the vision for Evanston's Roundhouse and Railyards.
It will be a great place for people to come and see because of its uniqueness, because of its rarity, because of its sense of place for our community. I can foresee a real great tourist attraction when we're done with the project.
People will be able to walk around the site. It will link to the rest of the historic sites downtown, kind of a continual fabric of Evanston's history. But it has so much meaning to people all over the western United States, all over the country, that we think everybody should come and see it and help us in what we're doing.
Let me take you down and show you the machine shop. Let me take you for a spin on the turntable. I guarantee if I can get you to the site and let you take a first-hand visit, you'll see the vision and you'll want to help.
The city of Evanston is dedicated to preserving its railroad heritage and making it an integral part of the city's future. The excitement surrounding this project is contagious. When you're ready to find out more, get involved and make a donation. You can find the link to the Railyards on Evanston's website at www.evanstonwy.org.
Boxcar Road, Boxcar Road. They named you for a train, but a truck is carrying you low down Boxcar Road. Can't you hear the echoes of the rails running across this country, leaving only a small trail, moving people and possessions quite well. Now it seems like the thing of the past. Falling out of man's favor, I'm afraid that the die is cast, a steel monument of beauty that won't last. Boxcar Road, Boxcar Road, named you for a train, but a truck is carrying you low down Boxcar Road.